The 30 by 30 Global Initiative seeks to protect 30% of the world's land and oceans by 2030. However, only 8% of the world's oceans are currently under some form of protection, and for nearly 2 decades, Enric Sala has been a leading advocate for ocean conservation. I speak with him about the challenges and strategies needed to achieve this ambitious goal.
We met in our studios in Washington, D.C.
You know, what I love about your story is here's a guy who has a very successful career in academia, you can coast right along, but instead you're kind of like conflicted and you chuck it. Can you talk to me about A, making that change in your life, which a lot of people are unwilling to do. It takes some courage. And B, what was it that drove you to do it?
Well, I was so frustrated because when I was a professor at the University of California, at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. And you are supposed to teach, and you are supposed to do and publish scientific research. And we are asked to publish as many papers as possible in peer-reviewed journals, right? That's the way scientists communicate the research. And my research was about the impacts of humans in the ocean, the impacts of fishing, global warming. And one day I was writing yet another paper on how fishing was destroying marine life in the Gulf of California in Mexico. And I caught myself writing another obituary for the ocean. I thought, wow, in 20 years I'm going to look back and all I'll have is more death notices for the ocean. So I felt like the doctor who's telling you how you're going to die, but not offering a cure. And that was the epiphany, that moment I decided to quit academia and work on the cure.
Sala holds a Bachelor of Science in Biology from the University of Barcelona and a PhD in ecology from Aix-Marseille University in France. He's a National Geographic Explorer in Residence and Executive Director of the Pristine Seas Expedition.
Was it a struggle though? I mean, I know that at that time you're like, I got to do this, but I mean, this is safe, this is different, because you really hadn't carved out where you were going or what you were going to do, but you knew what you wanted to do.
Yes, I was not happy continuing the same thing over and over and not having an impact. And I was scared, but yeah, I knew I had to do it. So I took a leave of absence to have some time to think about it. So I went back to Spain, where I'm from, and thought about it. And in 6 months, I realized I know what I want to do. And I went back to academia and told them, no, I'm done. And then I went to the National Geographic Society here in Washington, D.C., and I knocked at the door and said, hey, I have an idea. Why don't we combine what you are famous for, which is exploration, storytelling, and what I do, which is scientific research, and together we help to save the last wild places in the ocean. And this is how Pristine Seas was born. I came here to National Geographic in DC in January 2008 with a PowerPoint. I still have it. I met with senior executives and they liked the idea. So I moved to DC in July 2008. And since then, we've been working with governments and communities around the world to get these wonderful places protected.
And the PowerPoint, does it still hold up all these years later, or has it evolved, would you say?
I went back to the PowerPoint and showed it to our team. And they will say, wow, the mission is still the same, the vision is still the same. So we've been very loyal to that original vision.
You said difficult at the start. What were some of the hurdles?
First of all, the lack of funding. You want to do what? And also the opposition from the industrial fishing lobby, because fishing industry is very powerful politically, even though economically they are not really such great contributors to national economies here in the US and other places. Right? People have this myth that fishing is so key to many economies, including to countries that are considered big fishing countries like Spain. And when you look at the summary of the finances for the treasury for that year, in some countries fishing doesn't even appear because it's a rounding error, right?
How do you chip away at that?
Over the years, we discovered that the first thing we need to, the first part of their body we need to talk to policymakers about is the heart. It is they're making them to fall in love with these places. We take leaders with us, presidents, prime ministers, local chiefs on our vessel. We have this beautiful submersible with an acrylic bubble for 3 passengers, 2 passengers and the pilot. And we have taken presidents of countries. They come out of the water crying. This is the most transformational experience of my life. So they discover a new dimension of their own waters that they were not aware of. And it invariably, when you take people in the field, or if they cannot come with us, then we bring our films to them.
The Pristine Sea's most recent expedition is called the Global Expedition, a 5-year venture throughout the Pacific aboard their vessel AV Argo. Over a decade ago, a similar expedition happened off the coast of West Africa in Gabon.
How nervous were you the first time you went down with the president? Geez, I'm here with the president, and I got to sell him on this.
The first time we brought the president with us on board was in Gabon, in West Africa. The then president, Ali Bongo, came with a helicopter to our vessel, and we didn't have a submarine there, but we have a robot, a tethered, basically underwater robot with a camera. He comes on board with his entourage. We had been in the country for a month, exploring all of the waters from south to north. And I gave him a presentation, who showed him some images. And after a little bit, he was looking at the watch and said, oh, we are going to lose him really quickly, because he had to go to a cabinet meeting. And then somebody had the idea of asking him, Mr. President, would you like to pilot the robot? Oh, can I? So he did. And we were on top of a seamount, 100 meters depth, 300 feet. We put the robot in the water, and it was not very exciting. It was sandy bottom, and we thought, oof, this is going to be a disaster. And then we see this dark shape at a distance, and Mr. President, go that way. So he goes that way, he stops the robot, and what do we see? These rocks with thousands of scorpionfish, starfish, antheas, these little baselets, pinks, reds, yellows, oranges, so beautiful. And then this big eye comes in front of the camera. It was a dog-tooth grouper, about this big. And then another. We had 5 dog-tooth groupers looking at the camera, and he said, I had no idea we had this. And that was the moment where he decided, I'm going to create this program called Gabon Blue and protect 30% of the waters. That was the inspiration that he needed.
And the president gets on the helicopter and leaves. Was it a lot of high fives after that? I mean, because it could have gone either way.
Oh yes, no, we were all pretty happy. Yes.
Let me ask you about your childhood. Growing up, did you have a love affair with the sea early on, and has that kind of sparked you on this journey, you think?
Absolutely. I didn't need to be convinced. I grew up in Catalonia, on the Costa Brava, the Mediterranean coast of Spain, and I watched Jacques Cousteau's documentaries every Sunday. I didn't want to miss it. My dream was to be a diver in Jacques Cousteau's boat in the Calypso. And then when I went swimming in the Mediterranean in the summer, this is where I tried to emulate my hero, but that was it. It was Jacques Cousteau who really put the bug of the ocean in me.
And it's still there. I mean, you still, like we were talking before we started taping, you still have this love affair. I mean, each time and I think about this, I think each time you don't know what you're going to get, right? When you go underwater, isn't that one of the lures of this whole thing?
Yes, even during our expedition, Pristine's expeditions, we go to these places where, in most of these places, no research or filming has ever been done. So we go to a place knowing that, yeah, it's in the Central Pacific. We know what species of fish we're going to encounter, the types of corals, but we don't know what the condition of that place is going to be, because nobody had been there before, right? In uninhabited, remote places in the middle of nowhere. But even in the places that you know very well, like the first marine reserve where I dived, the place actually where I learned to dive in the Costa Brava, this little archipelago, the Medas Islands Marine Reserve, 1 kilometer offshore. I did hundreds of dives there. I did my research there. And I remember every week I would find something that I had no idea about. There were always surprises, especially in these protected areas without fishing, where marine life comes back spectacularly, and you find surprise after surprise.
Members of the Pristine Seas expedition were surely in for a surprise with their most recent finding. They came across the world's largest coral discovery in the Solomon Islands in the Southwest Pacific. It measures 138 meters in circumference and is visible from space. It is a beacon of hope.
I want to talk to you a little bit about your book, The Nature of Nature. Can you talk about what inspired you to do it?
The book, the idea for the book also was frustration, like when I left academia, because I was so frustrated that political leaders, CEOs of banks, business leaders had no idea about the basics of how the planet works, about the basics of nature. We're talking about, we're hearing about the sustainable economy, resilience, regeneration, all that stuff. But the true sustainable economy, the circular economy, where there is no waste, is nature, is the natural world. It's tropical forest, or old-growth forest in Europe, or a seagrass bed in the Mediterranean, or a coral reef in the Marshall Islands. There is no waste in nature. You walk on a forest, that oak forest, for example, or a forest where the trees leave their lose their leaves in the fall. You're not walking on meters and meters and meters of dead leaves. Actually, everything is recycled pretty quickly because you have the fungi, the bacteria, worms, insects. Everything in nature is recycled. There is no waste. Everything is put to use. And on our economy, it's a linear economy where we produce something, use it, throw it away. We need more, we produce more, use it, throw it away. And there is this accumulation of trash, especially plastic now in the ocean, which it's a disaster, right? So I wanted to show to people how natural ecosystems work, so leaders can understand, either business, political leaders, that, wow, this is the way to do it, right? And understand how can we learn from evolution that has been working for millions and millions and millions of years, and produce something that works, where you have thousands and thousands of species working together, everyone doing their job, right? And it works. But our society, our businesses, our economy, it's pretty inefficient. Our markets are so inefficient, right? And they are totally imperfect markets. So that was the motivation, to be able to have something to give them with storytelling. It's not a, I hope, not a dry book. So they can quickly, it's basically ecology for people in a hurry.
Only 8% of the oceans across the globe are fully protected. With the remaining 92% open to overexploitation, fisheries are collapsing all over the world.
You talked about recycling in the forest and the ocean and everything. In a sense, the oceans figure out a way to kind of keep themselves alive, and the forests as well. And I think one of the things that I like about you is I watched this Bloomberg talk where you talked about how, I think it was a place in Mexico, and again, you're talking about the fishing industry totally against it. And then you show the evolution of this area, and then you point out that the fishermen can make more money taking tourists down on dives, which actually is fantastic. You dive all the time. It's a great way to make a living. It's just basically changing the psyche and the economy in a sense, isn't it?
Yes. Well, there is a myth. Well, there are several myths that are perpetuated by industry, right? One of the myths is that we cannot protect more of the ocean because we need to catch more fish to feed more people. But today, 3/4 of the fish stocks that are fished commercially have collapsed, are overfished, which means we're taking fish out of the water faster than they can reproduce, or they are exploited to the limit. There is no evidence showing that a marine protected area that bans fishing actually harms the fishery. Why is that? Because when we don't kill the fish, they take a longer time to die. They grow much larger. And in these protected areas where we don't fish, the fish reach sizes that are unbeknownst to scientists, unbeknownst to fishermen, they reach their maximum sizes, their maximum potential sizes. And as they grow in length, they also grow in volume. So the number of eggs that a female can produce grows exponentially as they grow in size. So these big females produce most of the eggs, most of the babies, to replenish their populations. If we fish them, we never let them grow to these sizes. So we hamper their ability to self-replenish, right? No matter how well we manage these fisheries. But in these protected areas, you have the number of babies increasing like with compound interest. It's like a savings account that we don't, with the principal we don't touch, that grows with compound interest. And then all these babies that are produced, all these eggs and larvae, plus adult fish, they spill over the boundaries of the protected areas. And now around these no-take areas, the fishermen are catching more than before when they were fishing all over the place. And this is what happens in Mexico. In Mexico, there was this little place called Cabo Pulmo in the Gulf of California. The fishermen were so upset with not having enough to catch. And they knew that it was because of their overfishing. They didn't have foreign fleets fishing there. No, that was local overfishing for decades. So they talked to some scientists who told them about this idea of marine protected areas. So the fishermen petitioned the Mexican government to create a national park, 60 square kilometers with no fishing. What happened? In the beginning, it took a while for the fish to come back. I went there right after the protected area was created, and the place was overfished. It was mediocre, nothing special. And we returned 10 years later to the same places, and what had been an underwater desert was a kaleidoscope of life and color. All the fish came back, including the big predators, the groupers, the jacks, the sharks. Spectacular place. And who else is now thriving? Those visionary former fishermen who, as you said, now are making much more money taking divers to the water. So instead of catching one fish and selling it, they can sell that fish every day to different people. And the fishermen in the neighboring villages are catching the spillover from the reserve. So it's a triple win for marine life, for people, and for the economy.
Pristine Seas has conducted 45 scientific expeditions and worked with world leaders promoting the creation of multiple marine reserves.
Your job, in some respects, very daunting. So what excites you about Pristine Seas? What are some projects you're working on now that are really exciting you, would you say?
Well, right now our vessel is in Papua New Guinea, and we are working with the government and local communities in different islands. And Papua New Guinea is this amazing place. It's the center of marine biodiversity. So when you jump in the water, you find more corals, different types of corals and fish per hectare than anywhere else in the world. So we're very excited about that and working with them to help them to support their efforts to protect more of their waters so they can benefit even more from them.
How do you measure success? Is it the amount of space on the planet that's protected, or are there other metrics?
Yeah, well, there is quantity and quality. So the quantity is what the countries of the world have agreed to, which is 30% of the ocean protected by 2030, this 30 by 30. But then we want to make sure that these areas have the highest level of protection, because the more protected they are from fishing and other activities, the more marine life is going to bounce back, and the more spillover and benefits marine life is going to give to people. Yeah, so we need to make sure that we protect the right places also, because protecting a place that is productive will help the fisheries around. But if we protect a place there's a muddy bottom with nothing, right, what's the point, right? So we need to think of both quality and quantity.
We know that there are still problems out there. Have you shifted from obituaries to now the patient's in critical condition or stable condition? I mean, where are we, and what are the major issues that you still see out there?
Well, the three main issues affecting the ocean are: one is overfishing. We are taking fish out of the ocean faster than they can reproduce. Two is global warming, which is making the ocean warmer and more acidic and killing coral reefs and kelp forests and other species and ecosystems around the world, and also damaging fisheries. And the third one is pollution. Plastic pollution is something relatively recent. It's conspicuous, everybody can see it, but there are many other types of pollution that are invisible, like heavy metals, mercury, and other chemical compounds. So these are the three. pollution, we already have the legislation not to pollute. It's just a question of enforcing that legislation. For overfishing, that's the easiest to fix, because if you reduce fishing pressure in one place, if you protect an area, you have already an impact the day after, because there is a number of fish, lobsters, scallops, whatever it is, that are not killed, and they are going to be able to grow larger and produce more babies and help replenish the areas around. And then the global warming is the one that will take the entire world, and is the one that is being the most difficult challenge that humanity has ever had throughout its history.
So are you hopeful?
I don't think it's a question of hope. It is, but I don't want to be a Pollyanna-ish optimistic, oh yeah, no, we can do it. I believe in possibilities and in practical actions. And there are countries we have worked with that have already protected 30% of their waters or more before 2030. Right? Colombia has done it, Chile, Seychelles, Palau, Niue, the United Kingdom, or overseas territories, Gabon. So there are countries, especially countries in the global south, that have done it because they understood that protecting key places is essential for the survival of their blue economy, for the well-being of their citizens, especially in coastal areas. So if these countries in the global south can do it, why can the rest of the world do it too?
And obviously something we've got to work that much harder to protect, and you're there doing it. Thank you so much for visiting with us. It's been a great talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike.